Did you know that holding on to toxic relationships can slowly drain your peace of mind and emotional energy? In today's fast-paced world, we often find ourselves navigating complex relationships, whether they're with family, friends, or romantic partners. But what happens when these connections no longer bring positivity to your life? What if the very people you're supposed to trust and rely on are the ones causing you the most harm? If you want to protect your mental well-being and cultivate meaningful relationships, you need to be able to recognize the signs that it might be time to let go. Relationships should bring support, growth, and trust, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. In this video, we'll explore the 11 key signs that it might be time to end a relationship, even if it's with family or a close friend, according to the practical principles of pragmatism. Avoid the mistake of clinging to connections that only cause pain. Let's dive into the warning signs that could save you from emotional turmoil and help you focus on building relationships that truly add value to your life. Number 1. Consistent disharmony. Over time, at the start of any relationship, we often experience moments of joy, connection, and shared excitement. Remember those early days when everything felt new and effortless? The good times, laughter, and ease of conversation. But what happens when that harmony fades and the relationship seems to be in a constant state of friction? It's not uncommon to overlook small disagreements or misunderstandings in the beginning, hoping they'll resolve on their own. You might think to yourself, this is just a rough patch, we'll get through it. But over time, these small disagreements add up. The constant disharmony begins to weigh heavily on you, and suddenly, those once joyful interactions are overshadowed by tension. You start dreading conversations, avoiding confrontation, or finding yourself walking on eggshells just to keep the peace. It's easy to remember those moments when things were easy, those carefree days when a simple chat was all it took to brighten your mood. But now it's different. What was once natural is now exhausting. It's like a song that used to make you smile, but now feels grating on your nerves with every note. You wonder how it all changed. Was it something you did? Or is it simply a shift in the dynamic of the relationship? The pragmatist view here encourages us to evaluate what's working and what isn't. Pragmatism doesn't romanticize the relationship, it focuses on practicality. When the discord becomes constant, it's not just a temporary phase, it's a sign that something fundamental might not be aligning anymore. Disharmony isn't merely an inconvenience, it's a symptom that the relationship might no longer serve you, and it could be time to reevaluate its place in your life. If the peace you once felt is now only a distant memory, it's time to ask, can this relationship continue to serve you in the long run? Number 2. Unresolved conflict that continues to resurface. At the beginning of a relationship, it's almost impossible to predict the moments of conflict that will emerge. Maybe a little disagreement turns into a big fight. Perhaps a small misunderstanding lingers long after it should have been resolved. We've all had those moments, haven't we? The times when something went wrong, but both parties made the effort to fix it, move past it, and resume normalcy. But over time, there are conflicts that resurface, again and again, no matter how many times you try to put them to bed. These unresolved conflicts build like cracks in the foundation of a house. Each time you think you've addressed the issue, it comes back with more intensity, like the wind picking up and shaking the structure to its core. It's like revisiting the same arguments over and over, feeling like you're stuck in a loop. It might make you nostalgic for the times when things felt simpler. Remember when you could communicate without fear of things getting twisted or escalating. But now, every conversation seems to end in a conflict. The unresolved issues seem to build up without any real resolution, and it leaves you wondering if any progress was made at all. It starts to feel like an exhausting cycle you can't break. Each attempt to find common ground feels more futile than the last. From a pragmatic perspective, unresolved conflict is a major red flag. Pragmatism values practical solutions and tangible outcomes. When the same issue keeps reappearing, it's no longer about trying to get over a rough patch. It's about asking whether both parties are genuinely capable of working together to find a resolution. Relationships require adaptation and problem-solving. If the conflicts keep resurfacing without resolution, it may signal that the relationship is no longer effective in fulfilling its purpose. If a solution isn't coming and the conflict continues to drag you both down, then maybe it's time to reconsider its viability. Number 3. Toxicity that impacts your peace of mind. Think back to when you first met this person. What did you feel? Was there excitement? Was there an immediate connection? A sense that you both could build something meaningful? Now, fast forward to today. How do you feel when you interact with them? Do you feel uplifted, heard, and respected? Or do you feel drained, anxious, and unsettled? Toxicity isn't always obvious at first. It might be subtle. Small comments that chip away at your self-esteem or passive-aggressive behavior that leaves you second-guessing everything. But over time, the toxicity starts to take a toll. Your inner peace, once effortless, begins to slip away like sand through your fingers. You may remember the times when everything was easy, when being with them didn't feel like an emotional burden. There were days when being in their presence was comforting, like sitting in the warmth of the sun. But now, the relationship feels like a storm cloud hanging overhead, always threatening to rain down negativity. You start noticing the effects on your mental health. Perhaps you're feeling constantly on edge, or you find yourself overly stressed or even questioning your own worth. What once felt natural now seems suffocating. This is where pragmatism offers valuable insight. A pragmatic approach doesn't ignore the emotional aspect of relationships, but focuses on the practical effects. If a relationship consistently takes away your peace of mind, it's no longer serving its intended purpose. The goal of any meaningful connection should be mutual benefit, support, understanding, and growth. When that balance tips, and you're left with anxiety, self-doubt, or emotional turmoil, it becomes clear this relationship is not providing value to your life. If something continues to drain your mental and emotional resources without offering tangible, positive returns, it's time to reassess its place in your world. Number 4. Disrespect for boundaries. At the start of every healthy relationship, there's an understanding that personal boundaries are sacred. These are the invisible lines we draw to protect our emotional, mental, and physical well-being. Early on, it's easy to assume that these boundaries are respected, that the people in our lives recognize our needs and limitations. But what happens when those boundaries are repeatedly ignored or violated? At first, you might make excuses for them. They didn't mean it, you might tell yourself. I should be more patient, you reason. But when boundaries continue to be disrespected, it begins to wear down your sense of self-respect and trust. It's hard not to feel nostalgic for the times when everything felt effortless, when you didn't feel like you had to constantly defend your space, your time, or your needs. Remember those moments when you felt valued and understood. It wasn't about controlling the other person, but about mutual respect for each other's personal space and emotions. But as the relationship goes on, small infringements become bigger ones. What started as a minor annoyance turns into a consistent pattern of disregard. You may feel pressured to accommodate them at the cost of your own well-being. In pragmatism, relationships are seen as tools for achieving personal growth, fulfillment, and happiness. Boundaries are not simply guidelines for avoiding discomfort. They are essential for ensuring that both parties can thrive. When these boundaries are constantly disrespected, it's not just a small problem. It's a signal that the relationship is no longer functioning in a healthy, practical way. A relationship that doesn't respect boundaries doesn't offer the necessary conditions for both individuals to flourish. If boundaries are repeatedly ignored, the relationship is becoming harmful rather than supportive, and it's time to reassess the situation. Number 5. No mutual benefit or growth. In any meaningful relationship, there should be a sense of mutual benefit, a give and take that allows both individuals to grow, evolve, and feel supported. When you reflect on the relationships that have truly enhanced your life, what comes to mind? Is it the ones where you felt challenged, encouraged, and inspired to be your best self? Where your presence mattered as much as the other person's? But what happens when the relationship starts to feel one-sided? When you're giving more than you're receiving, or when the other person's needs always seem to come before yours? It can leave you feeling drained and unfulfilled. You might look back on the early days of your relationship and remember when it felt like you were both pushing each other to grow, to become better versions of yourselves. But now it feels stagnant. There's no progress, no mutual development. One of you may be constantly giving, while the other takes without reciprocating. The joy that once came from collaborating, helping, and learning together is now replaced by frustration and burnout. Your conversations become repetitive, and the connection feels superficial. You're no longer evolving together, and that shared growth you once enjoyed feels like a distant memory. Pragmatism stresses the importance of practical results. In the context of relationships, it's about looking at whether both individuals are benefiting from the connection. Relationships are not meant to be draining or stagnant. They are tools for mutual growth, understanding, and support. When one person stops growing or contributing, the balance is lost, and the relationship no longer serves a practical purpose. If the relationship no longer offers growth or mutual benefit, it's no longer a viable connection to keep. It's time to assess whether this relationship is truly adding value to your life or simply taking up space. Number 6. Manipulation or control. At first, it might be easy to overlook the subtle signs of manipulation. Maybe it starts with little gestures, someone telling you what to wear, subtly influencing your decisions, or making you feel guilty for having your own opinions. At first, you might brush it off as them just being concerned or protective. But as time passes, the manipulation becomes more apparent. They start to twist your words, undermine your confidence, or even guilt-trip you into doing things you don't want to do. The relationship no longer feels equal. One person is controlling the narrative, dictating terms, and trying to steer the relationship in their direction, all while making you feel as though it's your choice. This gradual shift might make you feel nostalgic for when things were simpler, when decisions felt shared, and your voice mattered just as much as theirs. But over time, you start to notice the subtle erosion of your autonomy. You wonder how you allowed it to happen. Remember those moments when you felt truly yourself, when you weren't questioned or manipulated for your decisions. It might seem impossible to get back to that point. Pragmatism values personal autonomy and clarity in decision-making. When manipulation or control becomes a constant feature in a relationship, it shifts from being a partnership to a power dynamic. A healthy relationship should allow both people to make independent decisions and contribute equally. If one person consistently manipulates or controls the other, it prevents both from living authentically and functioning as equals. Pragmatism teaches that such a relationship isn't just unhealthy, it's not functional. The practical solution here is to step back and evaluate whether this relationship is serving your best interests or merely exploiting your vulnerabilities. If manipulation is taking place, it's time to reconsider its place in your life. Number 7. Constant sacrifice without reciprocity. In many relationships, especially close ones, there's often a natural inclination to sacrifice for the other person, whether it's time, energy, or resources. At first, these sacrifices feel like acts of love and care, the small things we do to make the other person happy or comfortable. But over time, the balance between giving and receiving can shift. When sacrifice becomes one-sided and the effort isn't returned, it starts to feel like a burden rather than a gesture of love. You may find yourself remembering the times when sacrifices were mutual, the moments when you knew you were seen, heard, and valued just as much as you valued the other person. The energy you gave to the relationship felt reciprocated, and that mutual effort created a strong foundation. But now, those efforts aren't returned. You're the one always accommodating, always making the extra effort, while the other person takes and takes, leaving you exhausted, emotionally depleted, and unfulfilled. It's hard not to feel nostalgic for a time when the relationship felt equal, when your actions weren't just giving without any form of return. In pragmatism, the focus is on practicality and tangible results. If you are consistently sacrificing without seeing any form of reciprocity, it's no longer a functional relationship. Healthy relationships are about balance, where both parties contribute in ways that benefit one another. If your sacrifices are constantly going unnoticed or unreciprocated, the relationship is no longer serving its practical purpose of mutual benefit and support. Sacrificing without reciprocity becomes a draining, one-sided experience that leaves you with nothing to give. The relationship may have started with a healthy dynamic, but when the balance is lost, it's time to assess whether this connection is still worth maintaining. Number 8. Continual emotional drain without relief. There are some relationships that, over time, begin to drain us emotionally. At first, it might have been exciting, fulfilling, or supportive. You felt seen and heard. But eventually that initial spark fades, and what's left is a constant, unrelenting emotional drain. Every conversation feels like a tug on your energy. Every interaction leaves you more exhausted than the last. You might think back to when it was different, the time when the relationship added joy and comfort to your life. But now you dread engaging because it feels like you're constantly giving more than you're getting in return. As the emotional drain continues, you may find yourself remembering the lighter, happier times in the relationship. There was once a time when you could laugh, share, and grow together without the weight of constant emotional exhaustion. Those were the days when interactions were balanced and you felt energized, not depleted. But now even small conversations feel like they take a toll. You feel like you're always carrying the emotional weight, unable to find a break or relief. Pragmatism teaches us to evaluate relationships based on the practical outcome they bring to our lives. If a relationship continuously drains your emotional resources without offering any form of relief or support, it's no longer serving a practical or functional purpose. Healthy relationships should leave you feeling nourished, not depleted. Emotional drain without relief is a clear indication that the relationship is no longer healthy or sustainable. It's time to reconsider the dynamics at play and whether they're contributing to your well-being or detracting from it. A relationship that consistently depletes you emotionally is not aligned with the principles of practicality and personal well-being. Number 9. Compromising core values. In any meaningful relationship, there needs to be a shared understanding of core values. These values define who we are and what we stand for. Early in a relationship, it can be easy to overlook differences, especially when you're focused on the connection and the good moments. But over time, you might find yourself making compromises that challenge your beliefs, values, and identity. You might make excuses for why you're bending on certain things. it's not that big of a deal. Or maybe I'm being too rigid. But as these compromises accumulate, you begin to feel a disconnect from your true self. It's hard not to feel nostalgic for the times when you could stand firm in your beliefs and values without feeling guilty or pressured to change. Remember when you could express yourself fully without fear of judgment or rejection, when you didn't have to compromise on things that were essential to you. Those were the times when you felt most like yourself. But now, with each compromise, you feel a little further away from who you are. The relationship may have started with a shared understanding of values, but somewhere along the way, it became about sacrificing your core beliefs to keep the peace or maintain the connection. Pragmatism emphasizes the importance of practicality and the alignment of actions with values that lead to a meaningful and fulfilled life. Compromising your core values is a serious issue because it goes against the very essence of who you are. A relationship that forces you to compromise on what matters most to you is not a sustainable or practical relationship. Over time, these compromises can erode your sense of self and your ability to make decisions that align with your true beliefs. If a relationship consistently asks you to sacrifice your core values, it's no longer serving its practical purpose of mutual growth, respect, and authenticity. It's time to step back and reflect on whether this relationship is worth continuing, or if it's time to prioritize your integrity and well-being. Number 10. Chronic disrespect or lack of empathy. It's easy to overlook disrespect in the beginning. Small comments or actions that feel dismissive or inconsiderate might seem like one-off mistakes. But as time passes, these moments accumulate, and you start noticing a pattern of disrespect. The person may belittle your opinions, dismiss your feelings, or undermine your efforts. At first, you might have brushed it off, thinking it wasn't intentional, or maybe you even tried to rationalize their behavior, convincing yourself that they didn't mean any harm. But eventually, you begin to realize that this disrespect isn't an isolated incident. It's a chronic issue that consistently chips away at your self-worth. There was a time when you felt valued and respected by this person. You remember those early moments when they listened attentively, validated your feelings, and made you feel understood. But now, it feels like you're constantly fighting for their respect. They don't take your feelings into account, they interrupt you when you speak, or they downplay your concerns as if they don't matter. It's hard not to feel nostalgic for the times when things were different, when mutual respect was part of the relationship. Now, you find yourself questioning whether you deserve this treatment and wondering if things can ever return to what they were. Pragmatism, with its focus on practical outcomes, suggests that a relationship should be based on mutual respect and empathy for it to be meaningful and functional. Chronic disrespect or a lack of empathy directly undermines the practical value of a relationship. When you're continually being disrespected, your emotional well-being and self-esteem suffer, making the relationship more harmful than beneficial. Empathy is essential for understanding one another and maintaining healthy communication. A relationship that lacks empathy and consistently disregards your feelings is not contributing positively to your life. It's time to reconsider whether this relationship is practical or if it's slowly eroding your sense of self-worth and peace. Number 11. Lack of trust. Trust is the cornerstone of any meaningful relationship. It's what allows us to feel safe, secure, and supported. Without trust, relationships are built on shaky ground, constantly threatened by doubt and suspicion. When trust is broken, whether through dishonesty, betrayal, or a pattern of unkept promises, it's incredibly difficult to rebuild. At first, you may have ignored minor breaches of trust, rationalizing them as misunderstandings or mistakes. But as these small incidents pile up, it becomes harder to deny that trust is no longer present. Without trust, there can be no true connection, only a constant underlying tension that keeps you from fully opening up or relying on the other person. You may find yourself reflecting on the times when trust wasn't an issue, the days when you felt you could rely on the other person without hesitation, when promises were kept and your heart felt secure. Those were the moments when the relationship felt solid and dependable. But now, trust feels like a fragile concept. You second-guess everything they say, question their actions, and wonder if you can ever truly trust them again. The emotional burden of doubt starts to take its toll, affecting the way you engage with them and the relationship itself. Pragmatism teaches us that relationships must be practical, rooted in trust and reliability. If trust is continually broken, the relationship no longer serves a functional purpose. Without trust, there is no foundation for genuine support, connection, or growth. A relationship without trust is inherently unstable and unsustainable. If you find yourself in a relationship where trust has been repeatedly broken, it's a sign that this connection is no longer practical or beneficial for your emotional well-being. It's time to reconsider whether continuing this relationship is worth the constant strain and uncertainty it brings. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild, and a relationship without it is a fragile structure that risks falling apart. If you've made it this far, drop a thumbs up. It shows you're part of the 0.01% who are truly committed to making meaningful changes in their lives. Recognizing when it's time to end a relationship can be a difficult but necessary step in creating the space for healthier connections. By focusing on what adds value to your life and cutting out what doesn't, you're taking control of your emotional well-being and embracing the path to personal growth. If you're serious about transforming your life and learning more about how to make decisions based on clarity and pragmatism, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're here to help you navigate life's challenges with purpose, wisdom, and actionable insights. Take the next step in your journey by joining our community today.